Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Patriots Report. My name is Christopher Price, the Boston Globe and BostonGlobe.com, joined as always by my podcast partner, Chris Hogan. We are excited to have a special guest with us this week, Field Yates of ESPN. Field, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, good to be with you guys. Thanks for having me on today.
Let's start with this. The free agent the free agent time, the free agent session, whatever you want to call it, is in the rearview mirror now. The draft is done. Let's start here. What is your take on how the Patriots have done? We'll get into specifics here momentarily, but just kind of like a 10,000 feet view of the Patriots offseason to this point.
Well, I think the Patriots have, and I don't want this to scare Patriots fans right away, but when the Patriots offseason spending spree of 2020 went down, it became very clear that this team was going to be better than it was the year prior. How much better remained to be determined. A lot of that was going to hinge on how successful Mac Jones was as a rookie. It has some shades of that this year because they're clearly way more talented, right? I mean, and by the end of last season, when you factor in some of the injury issues, other than like Christian Gonzalez and the promise of Drake May, there weren't too many players that you said to yourself unequivocally, these are guys that are going to be, 5-year roster locks for this team going forward. It feels like the blue chip capital has dramatically increased this offseason. It comes in various shapes and sizes, but between Drake May and what we expect from him in year two, plus Will Campbell, the fourth overall pick, plus Milton Williams, the highest paid free agent to this offseason and the highest paid player in Patriots franchise history, and potentially plus Stefon Diggs, who was signed to a big money deal away from the Houston Texans. The Patriots have a bunch more players that now strike fear into opposing teams relative to where they were last year. On top of that, I think it's a safe assumption to say that the Patriots will be far better coached this year. And then on top of that, and this is not something they can control, but the schedule this year looks a lot more lenient compared to where it was last year. I know that Vegas has installed the Patriots as favorites, and I think 11 games this year. At this time last year, the number was way lower than that. This team is definitely better. How much better? We'll see, but they are definitely a whole lot better.
Oh man, you're playing into our cautious optimism here for 20. I think we were favored for what, three games last year, or
That sounds correct.
games. So
Yeah.
I think Chris and I were betting the over last year. We did not do well, and I think are cautiously optimistic about this year. But I mean, I gotta agree with everything you're saying. I mean, listen, Vrabel has wiped the slate clean of every single guy that was on one of these Super Bowl teams. He's brought in some talent. I think he's brought in some high caliber guys. I think it's just yet to be seen as like, can these guys kind of take the coaching, take what you guys all know as well as I do is what Josh McDaniels' offense requires and what he's going to kind of require of a lot of young guys on that team to kind of go out and be successful. So I'm excited about this year. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think there's reasons to be excited and optimistic. And I guess one dynamic that I didn't lay out in the first answer that I think is also worth noting is that, well, you don't build your team to compete with the rest of your division. The division does matter, right? And I'd say right now, Buffalo deservedly at the top of the heap, right? They should be viewed as the favorites. They have the reigning MVP and undoubtedly one of the top, 3 or 4 best players on the planet in Josh Allen. While he's at the peak of his powers, Buffalo's going to be really good. But at this time last year, we were talking about Miami and making a playoff push once again, and the Jets with Aaron Rodgers. Maybe this team becomes, a legitimate AFC threat. That's not the case right now. The Jets are not rebuilding, but Justin Fields strikes a lot less fear, I think, into opposing teams than the potential of what Aaron Rodgers was viewed as at this time last year. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers now is a much different character in the NFL, but we thought coming off of the Achilles injury last year, there's probably still one last hurrah for Aaron Rodgers in him. Turns out there wasn't, at least with the Jets. And the Dolphins feel like a team that's, frankly, in one of the scariest parts that you can be in the NFL geography, which is kind of in between. Not good enough, in my estimation, to make a legitimate playoff push. Like maybe they'll make the playoffs as the third wildcard team, but not a team that I think would be viewed as like the Commanders with Jaden Daniels last year, where it was like, that's the team you don't want to play once January rolls around, but also a team that I think will be good enough where they're not picking number 1 overall next year, get their opportunity to have, potentially a new quarterback. So a team that is in a weird transition. I'm not going to go as far as purgatory, but it's just this very unique space that you don't want to be in. too good to be at the bottom where you're getting blue chip players via the draft, but not good enough that if you're traveling to Kansas City or Baltimore in January next year, I'm not sitting here saying to myself, watch out for Miami to pull one over those guys and potentially get an upset victory.
Where do you stand on the whole Will Campbell arm length debate?
Yeah, I felt, and this is something that hey, I don't like to toot your own horn, but like I'm saying this more because I was consistent with this, months before Will Campbell was a Patriot, months before the Patriots even had the fourth pick in the draft. Will Campbell to me was one of the cleanest players in this past draft class. This was not the year prior. This is not the 2014 draft class where you've got these guys and it's like, oh my goodness, like, 7 or 8 guys who could end up being, all pro level players, or even, 3 or 4 guys who could end up in Canton one day. This was a deeper class in rounds 3 to 5 than it was, the very top of the first round. But I felt like with Will, you almost had to do it backwards when it comes to the arm length evaluation. What I mean by that is, if you're sitting there and you're buzzing through Will Campbell tape and you're seeing these plays left and right where pass rushers coming off the edge or getting their hands up in the chest plate of Will or finding ways to use their length to overwhelm Will, then maybe you go to your numbers, your spreadsheet, and you find out he's got 32 and 7/8 or 33-inch arms, and you're thinking to yourself, all right, we got a problem here, right? But if you watch Will throughout the past 3 years, which I did closely for my draft prep, this is a guy who every single week was as reliable as any player not named Jaden Daniels for LSU, or maybe Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. on LSU over the past couple of seasons. The guy was as steady as they come. He saw high-level pass rushers all the time in the SEC. It's essentially the NFL's AAA system. And on top, so I thought the arm length thing to me was a relative moot point. If for some reason he can't hang at left tackle in the NFL because the arm length proves to be a significant issue, A, I'll be surprised, but B, we're talking, we talked earlier about how Milton Williams was the highest paid free agent in the entire NFL this offseason at $26 million per year. That's because defensive tackles are becoming more important. That's also a reflection that guards are going to become more important as well if they haven't already, right? Because who's blocking those defensive tackles on 90% of their snaps? It's centers and defensive tackles. So if Will Campbell has to slide in and become an excellent guard, I still think there's value in that kind of player given the landscape of how the NFL has acknowledged, and Tom used to talk about this all the time. Tom, who had better in-pocket mobility than probably any quarterback to ever play the game, say the hardest guys for me to get around or for me to figure out are the guys coming right up the gut. The edge rushers, you at least have a chance to adjust, step up in the pocket, maybe retreat a little bit in the pocket. These guys coming right down the middle, coming right through you, Milton Williams and Jalen Carter in the Super Bowl, like you have no chance. You just have to basically take the sack and live to see another down. So I thought Will was outstanding on tape, and everything that I've heard Mike Vrabel say since he was introduced as the Patriots head coach about the traits and the kind of players that he wants reminds me of Will Campbell. And you got to send a message with some of your initial moves when you are a new regime. I think the message was sent loud and clear that you want guys who have some hard ass in them, which Will Campbell does, and have some determination in them, who are emotionally steady. They can ride the wave. I mean, it's trench warfare there for those offensive linemen for 60 minutes, and it's not always going to be pretty. You get beat the third play of the game. Yeah, that sucks on that play, but if you're not better on the fourth, fifth, and sixth, then the game might get out of hand in a hurry. I thought Will was one of the more had some of the best temperament of the offensive linemen that I studied in this past year's class. So, is he going to be Jonathan Ogden? Maybe not, but I think this guy's got a chance to become a 10-year fixture at left tackle.
I mean, that's an interesting point that you said. I mean, it's like if he doesn't do well at tackle, it's is he a bust? Oh, just slide him inside and see how he does. I'm sure he'd be an excellent guard with just his overall how he approaches the game. So listen, I mean, we never how these guys are going to be. We'll wait until August to all make our actual judgments when we put pads on and see how he does in live bullets. I mean, no one's going to really know. We sit here every single week and we talk about how these guys are going to be. It's like, well, let's see when the pads come on. I'm curious to see or what your thoughts are on how this skill position room is going to shake out this year, because we talked about Josh's offense, what it's going to take to learn the offense, the formations, the plays, the personnel. You know what kind of detail goes into his game planning week in, week out. Like, I think Drake's going to be fine. I think that he's going to be able to absorb all this stuff. I know Chris and I were talking about his interceptions at practice, but like, listen, man, I'd rather throw him in OTAs than throw him in the games. But so much of this offense relies on the skill players and their ability to be able to not just be one-minded, right? I need guys that can play 3 different positions or be in 4 different personnels and be able to kind of do this stuff all on the move. So are the young guys going to be able to step up? Are the guys that we drafted last year, are they going to kind of fizzle out with the guys that we brought in this year? Is Stefon going to be like one of those guys? He's not. I mean, I can talk about it, right? He's not at OTAs right now.
Yeah.
He's making splashes, and like, is that something that's not going to be good? Like, I hate to see it, and I know that that's not something that Vrabel wants to be dealing with right now in his first year as the head coach in New England and his first OTAs, and you got the number 1 receiver, arguably, coming off an ACL. A little boat gate incident going on right now.
Yeah. And I'm going to timestamp this. This is Thursday, May 29th at 10:15. So if there's like an update within an hour, don't hold us accountable, because what we know right now is that Stefon Diggs, there was a video that circulated of him on a boat with, looks like a group of women, and there was a substance that was called into question, and Karen Guregian, I believe, asked Vrabel about this during Wednesday's OTAs, and Vrabel admitted, we're looking into this, right? So, and I think that the reality is, and we'll see where this ends up, whether it ends up as a no biggie, a nothing burger, or something significant. The bottom line is that every decision you make on and off the field impacts the football team, right? And I know that Vrabel has a different voice than Belichick. But there are definitely some traces of Belichick in what he says, right? And the other thing that I think is just incumbent upon Stefon Diggs is 3 years, $69 million. That's the contract that Stefon signed to become Patriot. That's $23 million per year. That's the second most in the entire team, behind only Milton Williams, right? There is a responsibility that comes with that. That's just a fact. You're the highest paid player on the team. That means that a lot of other guys are going to look to you, whether you're the most natural born leader or not. But everything you do and everything you say is going to resonate more within the locker room. That's the responsibility of being the highest paid player, or one of the highest paid players on the team. From a football perspective, Stefon Diggs gives the Patriots something they don't necessarily have, which is an established wide receiver who a defense has to game plan around. Right now, if it's not Stefon Diggs and the Patriots roll out the football tomorrow and play a game against, of course, who's week 1? Raiders, excuse me. Yes, at Gillette. Who is the player that's scaring you? Right, amongst the wide receivers and tight ends, I think Hunter Henry is as steady and reliable as they come, right? But he's the kind of guy that you want. Like, he's a perfect sort of second, third option, probably third option, as opposed to the number 1 wide receiver or pass catcher within your offense. And it's going to be an adaptation for some of these young guys. What I'm curious about is, the Patriots obviously hired Josh McDaniels, which is, old, reliable, and a lot of people know that name. Everybody knows that name. But Chris, you can speak to this. Chris Hogan in this case. There's no one else on the staff that was either kept or an old Josh McDaniels disciple on offense, right? It's all Mike Vrabel guys, Todd Downing and the likes, and Josh McDaniels. I'll be interested to see how much of like a meeting in the middle there is. Is this going to be those guys speaking his language and just playing by his rules? Or is someone that's going to be from Josh, whose offense is difficult to pick up, right? I mean, you played with guys who maybe they were, Pro Bowl level talents, but just couldn't pick it up, right? I mean, the football intelligence you had is hard to find, right? So I'll be curious to see if there is, I don't call it simplifying it, but maybe finding some middle ground that allows young players, because this is still a young roster on offense, to get a little further up to speed in a hurry to be more competitive and not have to go through the growing pains.
We haven't talked about that enough, is that there's, Josh has always relied on, the Chad O'Shea's, the Ivans, all of those guys that were with him for so long that can pretty much teach that offense by themselves. There's going to be a lot of there's going to be a learning curve too for the coaching staff and how they are able to verbalize this stuff to their specific room. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely probably going to be some of that for sure. I would say that Josh would probably shoulder a lot of that responsibility. Maybe there's more walkthrough, maybe there's more team, offensive meetings as a whole, that we're going to really go over these tiny details that really make a difference when in his offense, and so that everyone can hear it, everyone knows what they're doing or what everyone's room is. I mean, you're going to have to put accountability somewhere. So if it's going to be Josh, then he's going to take the accountability, take the time to teach the offense. But at some point, like, we're going to have to put this on top of the players' shoulders for them to like be able to study the playbook, to not just rely on an hour-long offensive meeting or however long their specific team their room meetings have, and then be able to kind of take it to the field. So I think that there's going to be a little bit of kind of give and take here. Listen, that's what OTAs are for. That's what mini camp is for, and that's what camp is for. So I got to imagine, though, that they're really diving into this offense and taking the time to teach. Right. I mean, that's really what this whole time frame is about. But yeah, there's definitely going to be, how well are the specific coaches going to be able to teach Josh's offense and be able to kind of get it to where he wants it to be, because Chad could not even sit in a room with Josh and he'd be able to teach the offense to us, right? And he'd be able to tell us what's important, what do we need to know. Especially with these young guys, man, like, let's focus. We don't need to focus on the whole picture. Like, let's focus on what exact details that we need to know. And Chad could do that with his eyes closed. He'd probably get a little, talk back from Julian every now and then, but like, still, he could do it, right? But he also had guys like Julian who were in the offense for 15 years, and that could teach it as well. So like, you don't have that anymore, right? The only guy, I mean, you really don't. You don't have it at all. So that's going to be like the biggest challenge, is how far is this offense going to be able to go with Josh, or how detail oriented is he going to be able to take it, with the guys that he has. But again, that's going to be whoever's going to be willing to step up and be on the field and know what they're doing is going to be on the field. I mean, that's going to be they're not just going to roll guys out there. I can tell you that much. Vrabel's definitely not that type of coach, and Josh is not going to, if he doesn't trust you, you're not on the field. I mean, that was made very clear to me from day one. Regardless of who you are, if you don't know what you're doing, see you later. So, we'll see what happens.
Field, other than Will Campbell, which member of the draft class has the best chance at making an impact as a rookie?
Yeah, TreVeyon Henderson's the answer. And it might be that TreVeyon is discussed a whole lot more than Will throughout the season because of the position that he plays, right? It's just easier to make a quantifiable mark and also like make highlight reels when you play running back as opposed to left tackle. TreVeyon was incredible throughout his Ohio State career, but he really had his best season this past year when he had the chance to be lightning to Quinshon Judkins thunder. And that's what I think is the Patriots' vision here, is Ramondre Stevenson, who I thought was disappointing as a player last year. I expected more out of him. And frankly, after signing that big contract, I think it was not great return on investment. I think he's probably motivated to have a great year this year. And I think that two-man backfield can be very good here in New England. It's Ramondre kind of doing the stuff between the tackles, and third and gotta have it might go to Ramondre, maybe even Drake May on the tush push, which still lives, of course. But Henderson is the guy who, he's instant offense. He's like microwavable offense, right? Like every time he touches the ball, he's a threat to do something explosive. And he's got excellent speed. He's a very good factor in the passing game as well. And, a handful of years ago, the Cowboys had this duo of Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard, and they really were a good example of the thunder and the lightning, where Pollard was the guy that like perimeter runs, tosses, sweeps, you name it. Like maybe it was a little bit predictable, but he was so electric and the offensive line blocked it up so well that they were just chunk playing the crap out of you on the running game. And I think that TreVeyon Henderson can do that for New England this year. He's just a really, really, really explosive player. And the Patriots this year, I think, have a much better chance to get some instant offense, like some easy button offense that they didn't get last year. As you guys know, every single drive last year was like grind it out, probably hope that Drake May does something crazy cool, see if you can find your way into the red zone and then punch it in. this year, the possibility, at least, of the Patriots having, whatever, 340 plus yard rushing touchdowns, I think is way more in play because of Travion Henderson. And then, if Stefon Diggs is on the field to begin the season, which I don't know this for a fact, but seems like the rehab process is going well for Stefon. They at least have a few more players that can stretch you in ways that the offense couldn't stretch you last year. Mac Hollins will never be viewed in the same light as Stefon Diggs in terms of peak value, but a guy who last season was kind of this big slot for Buffalo who did a good job of stretching the field vertically for them. He's got really good speed, very powerful guy,
Love
good
that dude.
verticality. Yeah,
Love
and
that
he's obviously he's a very he's a great character as well. The guy's got one of the more vibrant personalities in the entire NFL. So the offense definitely has more players that can make things easy on Drake May, and that's led to me, at least, by Travion Henderson.
Field, let's get you out of here on this one. I know we
Okay.
only have you for a short time here, but I'm curious, is there a guy who, either a rookie or a free agent, that we're not talking about now who has a chance to make a sizable impact on either side of the ball for the Patriots this season?
Ooh, man, that's a good question here. My gut is always like, can you turn to the second year players, as Belichick always famously talked about that year one to year two leap, right? I'm not sure what to make of the draft class last year, past Drake May. It might just be kaput, some cost, right? I would love to see Jalen Polk get things going, right? And I think this is a good mental challenge for him this year is, hey, can you dig yourself out of the lows from last year? Layden Robinson, who was in the starting lineup for good stretches of last season, but also, a guy that right now is not viewed, at least in my estimation, as a lock to be a starting offensive lineman by any stretch. So I don't know if there's anybody that like immediately strikes me as, I don't know where he's at health-wise, but Marcus Epps a good player if he's healthy. Had a really, had a good tenure with Philadelphia, ends up in Las Vegas, a little bit of familiarity with some people here now in New England, Josh being the most obvious example. This safety room is going to look a lot different this year, obviously. Craig Woodson, who they drafted and from Cal, is going to make a mark at the very least with his physicality. That safety room is one that I've got my eyes on. Could there be a Craig Woodson or a Marcus Epps sighting here or there? We were so used to last year so much of obviously Kyle Duggar and also Jabril Peppers. I think there's going to be more contributors to the safety room this year that could make their mark.
Field, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Let people know what you have coming up when it comes to your coverage for ESPN.
We're just grinding away on the fantasy football front and 2026 draft stuff. It's a nice time of the year, though. We're a little quieter. If my back weren't, I'm 38 with an 83-year-old back. If that weren't the case, hopefully I would tell you, like, I'll be posting pictures of a hole-in-one, but that'll probably never happen. So
you know what it is? You're carrying ESPN's draft coverage, man. That's why you got the back problem. Come on, everyone.
That's a way to go out right
there. There we go. Field, thanks again, man. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
And hopefully we can hook this up again really, really soon.
For sure.
Thank you.